and welcome to Awkward Double Bills, a podcast in which a cinephile and a genre fan try to broaden each other's cinematic horizons, one film at a time. I'm Matt Schaefer.
And I'm Rob Takizawa-Lowe. In this bonus episode, we'll be reflecting on the first 10 episodes of the podcast, discussing some of our favourites and least favourites, and sharing some of what we've learned from watching each other's picks. Let's get into it. Okay, before we get to our roundup, Matt, is there anything that you've been watching recently you'd like to share with the audience?
Well, there is one thing film I saw, which is It Follows.
Ah, nice.
Yes, and there's two reasons I watched this film. One is that the director has a new film coming out, The End of Oak Street, which I invited you to, but unfortunately you can't come to the cinema to see with me.
Yes, big shame.
That's one reason, and it looks. I don't know what kind of film it is. It's sort of advertised and presented as a big summer dinosaur blockbuster movie. But I had heard of It Follows, and I knew the director had a good reputation, and so I thought it sounded interesting. And then I thought I'd go watch It Follows because everybody says how good it is, and I think you've told me to watch it a few times. And to be honest, I think doing this podcast was a factor in me watching this film.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, I don't think I would have gone and watched a horror film if I wasn't being forced to by doing a podcast. So I think maybe, we'll talk about this later, but I think maybe having done this podcast has given me a slightly different perspective, or I maybe even say it like a different respect for the genre. So I watched that.
What did you think of it?
It wasn't exactly what I was expecting. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but I thought it was very well done. I don't know if I was ever that scared. There's definitely some sort of disturbing imagery, some moments and images that I think, do stay with you and are meant to be unsettling. And the whole premise is kind of unsettling. But yeah, I thought it was good. I thought it was interesting. And I think it's even more excited to see the Oak Street movie.
Yeah, it's a shame that I can't get to that because I am a big fan of It Follows. And I think what's really interesting about it is that, in horror, you do tend to get recycled monsters over and over again, like vampires, zombies, werewolves, whatever. There's the same kind of things over and over again. And I think It Follows is one of those films where it's like, oh, suddenly, bang, we've got an entirely new, kind of monster, a new kind of antagonist that we haven't seen before. And at the same time, there was another film called Lights Out, which I think came out the same year, which also introduces an entirely new monster that we've never seen before. And I like both of those films. Like, Lights Out isn't a great film. It's okay. It's not as good as It Follows. But I really like that you can still innovate within the genre and create these new creatures and new monsters and new threats. So, whatever you think of the film itself, I think it's got that going for it at least.
Yeah, the one thing about It Follows, I really appreciated the different premise of just this thing slowly moving towards you. And so there's a threat, but it's not always very immediate. I thought that was a very interesting twist on it. The only thing I didn't really get was there's a lot of scenes of characters who know that they're being followed by this thing, and they're just not constantly looking over their shoulder. Or they're going and just like being alone somewhere. I think most people, if they knew this thing was following them, would be behaving very differently, basically.
Yeah, but how do you know how you'd behave? It's the same as in slasher movies when they go, okay, let's all split up. You think, well, no. Even Scream commented on this, right? Like, the woman's always running upstairs when she should be going out the front door. Like, these films don't really work unless you contrive ways for the characters to be surprised by the threat.
Yes. Yeah. Of course. But I think some of these films maybe figure out a way to, bring that all together in a more realistic way. But I think it was also the mood that was created by the film. I like the sort of the vague time setting that it had.
It was temporally ambiguous.
Temporally ambiguous. And the location felt very specific, but sort of kind of odd as well. And even just the way he shot it. I mean, the film that it reminded me of the most was, I guess, Halloween.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I think even just the framing and the way that the creature would, appear in frame, and you're always looking out for it. Yeah,
yeah, and also, I mean, Michael Myers is that kind of relentless, slow, always coming for you kind of killing machine, right?
Mm-hmm.
And who seemingly can't be stopped.
Yes.
Yeah, or can be temporarily slowed down, but not stopped. Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, nice. Well, I'm glad that you're dipping your toes more into the horror pool.
Yes, and careful not to get electrocuted or have a toaster thrown at my head. Okay, and what have you seen recently?
Well, two things of note. Number one, very exciting. I went to see Claudio Simonetti's Goblin live in Tokyo at the Tokyo Billboard Club, and that was great. I saw the same band doing the live synchronized soundtrack to Demons 3 years ago, and this time was them just basically playing their hits. But I've got no problem with that. And they were projecting, kind of trailers for the films that were sort of synchronized to the music in the background of each song, which was good. And it was just really, really fun, just fun to listen to. They played themes from Suspiria, Tenebrae, like a lot of Argento stuff, Demons again, but then also some deeper cuts, like Cut and Run, which is a Ruggero Deodato movie, the guy who made Cannibal Holocaust. It's the third of his kind of unofficial cannibal trilogy. Several others, like Dawn of the Dead. They played the theme from Dawn of the Dead. And it was good fun. I enjoyed it a lot.
It's all instrumental? Is that right?
It's all instrumental, apart from Tenebrae, where Simonetti uses like a vocoder to say the name of the film over and over again at certain points. And the theme for Mother of Tears, which is the third of Argento's Three Mothers trilogy from 2007, where they have Danny Filth from Cradle of Filth doing the vocals, but it's literally just saying she's a mother of tears, something, she's a mother of tears. And that's just, he wasn't there. It was just, kind of synchronized to what they were playing. But apart from that, it's all instrumental. It's all soundtrack stuff. The band actually does have a non-soundtrack album that they wrote, which is just basically horror style prog rock, which I own on vinyl because I'm a loser. But they didn't play any of that, which is a shame because I'd have enjoyed that.
Was it a type of gig where you could shout out requests?
No, not really. No, it was a seated. Everyone was eating down on the floor in front of the stage. I was up in the nosebleeds, so I could have gone, play, I don't know, Hands of Steel or whatever, but I'd probably been ejected.
Did they play the creepy kid song from Deep Red?
They didn't, but they played the theme from Deep Red. They played the theme from Deep Red. And the creepy kid song from Deep Red is by Goblin. I checked. It's on the soundtrack. I listened to the soundtrack on Spotify, and it's on the soundtrack.
Okay.
Yeah.
Huh. Very nice.
Yeah, it was very good. And then the only other thing, I've watched a few, I've been rewatching a few things. So I watched Godzilla -1 and Prey and things like that. But the one of the new things that I watched, which I was quite excited to talk about, was last night I watched a movie called Cruel Jaws, which is a Bruno Mattei film. And it's just Jaws, like he just does Jaws. It's like the plot is exactly the same as Jaws. And it had it had lots of day for night shots, day for night.
It's a Truffaut film called Day for Night.
There you go. So all the night scenes were just, obviously the sun with the blue filters.
Yeah.
And the dialogue was pretty terrible. Most of it was inaudible. It was very badly recorded. But I got my particular favorite line was a woman was having an argument with her marine biologist boyfriend, I think. And there were two things she said which stood out. The first was, "What's wrong with you, Billy? Is the fish or me?" I thought it was very good. And the other one was, let me just find it. I wrote it down and shared it on Blue Sky. Here we are. "Billy, I want you to find the tallest skyscraper in LA and throw yourself off, and then go fuck yourself."
Nice.
Yeah, stunning stuff.
Okay. Does it take place in LA?
No, it was just on a beach. I think she said LA. To be honest, I might
Okay.
have got that wrong. It was like I said, the audio was almost inaudible. Yeah, not a great film, but I enjoyed it. It felt like he was trying. So, you know,
What made it cruel?
because the shark was eating people. I think I consider that fairly cruel behavior.
Okay, but I mean, the shark in the original Jaws was also doing that. So what made this a cruel version of Jaws?
Well, the shark in the original Jaws didn't have intent, right? I mean, he's just a shark. So if it's not got intent, it can't be cruel. And I feel this one had intent. I think it was cruel.
Okay.
I don't know.
He left notes after each kill, or
yeah. You could tell he was relishing it. He was like, ooh. They're not enjoying this. Num num num.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So
Nice.
yeah, it was good fun. I'd recommend Cruel Jaws to anyone with nothing to do and no self-esteem.
Who thought the shark in the original Jaws was too nice?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I said on Blue Sky though. I mean, like Jaws. People say that Jaws is like the definitive killer shark movie. But I disagree, because Jaws is about other things. It's about like post Watergate distrust of authority. It's about man facing up to the pitiless cruelty of nature. The Cruel Jaws is literally just about a killer shark. So I think it's the definitive killer shark movie over Jaws. Should we get to our roundup of the first 10 episodes of the podcast?
Let's.
So the first topic we've got here is our favorites of each other's choices. And I only chose one for this, but I understand that you've made a list of your top 3.
I have.
So do you want to begin while I look at the list and sort of massage my answer to this question?
Yes. I mean, it's very difficult actually to come up with the top 3 list. I think probably my top 6 films of the 10 of yours that we talked about, any of those 6 could like end up in a top 3 probably. But currently what I went for this time was, I'll do reverse order just to make a little bit of tension, I guess.
Okay. Do you want me to do like a number 3 kind of
yes,
countdown? Okay.
So number 3.
Oh, well, I was going to do it.
Sorry. Okay, you were going to do it. I thought that was it.
No, okay. Number 3.
My number 3 film is Halloween.
Okay. Good choice.
Yes. I mean, to be honest, part of the reason I chose it was its iconicism as a horror film. Michael Myers is, the look of Michael Myers is obviously very iconic and familiar to anybody who hasn't even seen the films, I think, to any movie fan. The way it played, it was different from what I was expecting. It was a lot more about the main character, Laurie, and just her, following her throughout her day. For the most part, I thought, well shot and well edited. You could tell it was sort of an independent film, but a lot of effort put into making it look good and ratcheting up the tension. It's probably not a film I would go back to be honest. And I think at the time I was maybe a little interested in, because he does survive. Everybody's, well, all the main people survive basically at the end. So I was a little interested in seeing, what happens to them later. But not so much that I'm going to watch any other Halloween films, I don't think.
Well, unless I choose them, and then you've got no choice.
That's true. Yes. Should we go to your number 3 now?
Okay,
Or
sure.
have you not? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So my number 3 is Paths of Glory, Stanley Kubrick's Paths of Glory from 1957.
Okay.
So this was an early episode. I think this was episode number 3. And I really enjoyed this, partly in contrast to the film that I chose, which was another Bruno Bataille film. I just thought it was very, very cleverly put together, very interesting. The performances were all very good. I enjoyed it. It was a war film. It had a message that I can get behind as, a sort of a lefty weirdo, anti-war kind of thing. And sort of, distrust of authority figures to some extent, although obviously Dax was not the worst of the authority figures. Overall, I just thought it was a very well-made movie, good messaging, I'd seen Kubrick before, but this was a side of Kubrick that I hadn't seen, and I enjoyed seeing some of the elements from this film that I recognized from other films like The Shining, like the tracking shots and that kind of thing. So yeah, I thought that that Paths of Glory was very good. It's my number 2.
Okay. It
Or
was
my number 3, I should say.
perhaps the earliest Kubrick you've seen?
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. It's sort of maybe a kind of slightly transitional film for him. I think all of his films are great, including the very early ones. But obviously his final, however many, 6 or 7 films, each of them is very, very distinctive and is, very strong, style. And this was one where that style was starting to come out. And like you said, some of those key marks. That's not a word. What's the word? Hallmarks? I don't want to say hallmarks. What's the word? Touchstone.
Things he does a lot.
I was going to say touchstone. That's not it either. Hallmark. Landmarks. No, I'm not going to find it. Okay. Anyway, it was like those defining directorial touches of his.
Yeah. I thought it was very interesting. I kind of prefer directors when they're in their early phase to when they've sort of settled down into a groove. I like it when they're sort of still casting around a little bit and experimenting and trying to figure out their style. I also kind of like it when directors are a bit more compromised by studio requirements. I don't like it when they've got full artistic vision. So I think they can get a bit self-indulgent and they start making films for, more for critics than audiences sometimes. So yeah, I like this one. It worked for me as a genre fan, as a dirty genre fan.
Do you think Kubrick ever fell into that of making films for critics?
Not necessarily for critics, but I think I think the impetus to sort of be crowd pleasy, to play to the audience, I think drops off a little bit maybe in his later films. But yeah, I mean, I haven't rewatched many of his later films to be able to give you sort of concrete evidence of that. I just felt that this one was much more sort of crowd pleasy. It felt like a more audience focused film to me.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Yeah, I think, I agree. I don't think he made films for critics. So I think he was making films mainly just for himself later on.
Yeah. Okay.
Which, and there's an aspect that's fine in a way. But yes, I agree with you. I mean, it'd be interesting to look at other directors who've gone through similar trajectories.
Well, maybe we will.
Number 2. My number 2 is actually The Night of the Comet.
Okay, nice.
Yes. For me, it was the most fun of the films that you chose. But it was also, I thought it was, competently made. It was well made. And a little bit nostalgic for me, to be honest, when I think about it. I hadn't seen it before, but I'd seen many of that, that type of 80s film. And the music and everything. I mean, it almost felt like, I just watched a trailer for something called, I think it's called the 80s movie. It's a fund, what do you call it? Crowd-funded Kickstarter project. And as far as I can tell, it's just like a bunch of like clips of movies and music videos and news things from the 80s, just all edited together. Just unabashedly, trying to appeal to people of my age, nostalgic for their youth. And I'm not that interested in that, but watching a film that was genuinely made in the 80s was fun. I don't know. It was a fun film, but also, and it had it definitely had some of those like genre touches to it. It was a little quirky at times. It was a little odd at times, but it was also like well done. So nice. I liked it.
I think that, obviously there's a lot of 80s nostalgia around at the moment. And my kind of supposition about that is that it's sort of a bury your head in the sand thing about like a lot of modern life and the way the world's going. People are like, oh, wouldn't it be nice to go back to the simple 80s when everything was fine, which obviously it wasn't. The world's never been like that. But I'm always a little bit suspicious of, well, at the moment I'm a little bit suspicious of nostalgia because I think it is just a way of sort of hiding to an extent. But I don't think there's anything wrong with diving back into actual films from the period and just enjoying them for what they were.
Yes, I think I agree. I think that nostalgia there can be that element of of just burying your head in the sand. But I also think, I mean, I just watched this trailer today of this 80s film. I can't remember the exact quote that they used at the end of the trailer, but it was something, and I don't know what it was from. It's from a film or like a news story. But it was somebody basically like talking about the future and saying how scared she was of the future.
Mm.
And the way I interpreted that was, I mean, there's like an element of like, oh, look at this. Like even like back in the 80s, she was right to be scared, basically.
Mm.
And I think like another possible reading of that nostalgia is saying like, look what we had and look what, we could have had and look like what, we could have, the bright future that we could have built out of that. But instead we've ended up in, the worst possible timeline, potentially.
Yeah. Well,
So I think, so I think there's an element of it where it could be looking back, but like doing the opposite of burying your head in the sand. It could be like saying, like, look where we are based on where we came from.
Have you seen the Wrestler, the movie?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a bit in that where he's talking to that woman at the bar and he says, oh, the 80s were amazing. It was all fun, weren't worrying about things. And then the 90s, it's all just miserable. And, and I think there is a feeling that the 80s, and in the UK, maybe the 90s just as much, or maybe more so, but the 80s was a time of like, great confidence. We had like the Thatcher in the UK, the Reagan Revolution in the US, where people were very confident because there were these sort of short-term things which were benefiting, certain classes of people in society, which probably are the root of a lot of what we're dealing with now, privatization and, deregulation, that kind of thing. But at the time, there was this big feeling of confidence, this big feeling of things are just going to keep getting better. We're all going to keep getting richer. We're all going to make it, and it turns out that isn't actually true, or, it's true for a very short time. And then you've got several generations now paying down the cost for that little party time. So, it's, in a way, there's something sort of sinister about that nostalgia, right? Because you're nostalgic about a time that was really bought with, it's a debt that's being paid off.
Right.
It's bought with,
right.
with the future debt.
Yes. Yeah.
Anyway, the Night of the Comet, great film.
But yeah, I mean, like, the progress narrative that was maybe, I don't know, maybe created and promoted so much in the 80s. Like you said, instrumental in maybe where we ended up now. But I think part of it is also, I mean, I was a kid. I was born in 76. So, throughout the 80s, I was a little kid. I know very little idea of what was going on geopolitically and economically and all that stuff. And I think for most, I mean, I don't know, obviously not for most people. For a lot of people, your childhood is a good time. And if you're surrounded by, fun movies and fun music, you think, yeah, this is great. And so I'm definitely like, there is an element of the nostalgia thing, just tapping into people wanting to relive that. Yeah, like I said before, I think, you can couple that with an element of reflectiveness. So looking back, but also connecting that to where we are now.
Yeah. I think that's true. Well, I think it's necessary, right?
Yeah.
But did you feel that watching Night of the Comet?
Well, what was interesting with Night of the Comet is, I mean, it's an apocalyptic movie, but it's keeping a lot of the 80s stuff, and it is critiquing 80s culture at the time, which is interesting.
Yeah.
And there is a sense like, okay, it's the end of that world, but we'll just make something new and maybe even better from now on. And so I think, yeah, I mean, you could read it as sort of the ultimate progress narrative, where even though most of humanity has been wiped out, we'll still just keep going forward. Things will keep getting better.
Yeah. Behind my wife's house, there was this huge ancient tree. It had been there for hundreds and hundreds of years. And a few years ago, it blew down in a typhoon, and it was cut down. There was just the trunk was there, and the middle of the trunk was hollow because it was such an old tree. They kind of hollow around in the middle. And someone planted a sapling of the same tree in the middle of the trunk, and now there's a new tree growing there. So maybe that's what we'll do. Maybe that's like a metaphor for what we're going to do.
Yes, nice.
My number 2 is The Apartment. from 1960.
Okay.
Yeah.
What
I
did
really
you like
enjoyed
about The
this one.
Apartment?
Well, I'd not seen a Billy Wilder film before. I
Except for
thought that.
Double Indemnity.
Oh yes, except for Double
Yeah.
Indemnity, which I didn't
Yeah.
realize, and I keep forgetting is a Billy Wilder film. It's very different.
Well, I mean that's sort of one of the not defining features, but yeah, one of the sort of interesting things about Billy Wilder is he made these very different types of films.
Okay, well, I'm looking forward to seeing more Billy Wilder in the future.
Mm.
Yeah, I thought that it was very, very cleverly scripted. I thought that the tone shifts throughout were very well done. The performances were great. I thought Shirley MacLaine was fantastic. I thought Jack Lemmon was great. And I really enjoyed the way that all the characters were presented in this kind of imperfect way, but there were several different ways of reading them and their situations, which we went into in the episode. I liked the sense and the use of space, which we talked about. The space of the apartment and how the openness of the apartment kind of reflected his character, and he's kind of being taken advantage of, and people are sort of seeing through him and that kind of thing. So yeah, I there were very few things I disliked about it, really. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a very nicely, cleverly put together film. I liked all the characters. I liked the performances, and I think it covered a lot of issues that are kind of perennial in relationships and self-development and so on. So yeah, good thing.
Okay, nice. It's I mean, I was looking through the 20 films that we've discussed so far. Actually, 10 of the 20 films we've discussed are American. I mean, 11 if you include sort of U.S. European sort of co-productions.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's quite a few. I guess Philadelphia Story and Big Sleep, and I don't know, Paths of Glory to Excitement, but and The Apartment, like very much sort of Hollywood films in a sense. Does it feel like a Hollywood film to you?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, obviously the actors and maybe the style. When I was listening back to that episode when we talked about it, I think one thing I mentioned was maybe like a slightly European feel to it. I think I was referencing like maybe more the pacing of it and the story structure. Did you feel that at all?
Well, I mean, my exposure to European film is primarily sort of Euro horror, so it didn't feel like that to me.
Sure. Okay.
I mean, to me, it felt like a very American film in terms of the themes. There was, a lot of sort of capitalism and striving and all that kind of thing. But also, it reminded me a lot of Harold Lloyd. I'm a big silent comedy fan, and I love Harold Lloyd. I've got a big collection of all the Harold Lloyd movies, including a few sort of grey market DVDs of films that aren't available. And Lloyd always played like, the sort of underdog striver who was doing his best to make it in America, in the land of opportunity, and always coming up against these big wigs who wanted to stamp him down. But at the end, he'd triumph and he'd get what he wanted, which is usually a girl, And this to me read very much like a Harold Lloyd coded film. So yeah, to me, it was very American in terms of themes and in terms of, sort of other American classic movies.
I mean, you mentioned that theme of capitalism and striving and everything. But did you see the film as a critique of those things?
To some extent. Not necessarily as a critique of capitalism and striving, actually. I don't think he's ever critiqued for ambition. He's critiqued for over-ambition or for trying to fulfill his ambitions in the wrong way. And, I think what we see is a sort of critique of crony capitalism, perhaps, allowing people to sort of cheat and get ahead in certain ways. But I think his initial sort of hard-working attitude, I don't think that's ever critiqued. So I think that, it doesn't critique capitalism as such. It critiques, certain abuses of that system.
Right. That's that makes sense. I was
thinking,
see it
as a criticism of capitalism more broadly.
Yeah. Okay. I agree. Maybe not of capitalism itself, but as of those kind of negative aspects within capitalism.
Mm.
If you can sort of separate them out, I guess. But I think I don't know, because I think it's come up a few times. Um, I mean, in the Philadelphia story, for example, I guess it's maybe more of a class thing, but like the Jimmy Stewart character and his friend, I can't remember her name, but when
Mm.
they first arrive at the house of the lords, like it's just they just walk through the house critiquing and making fun of this rich family,
Mm.
and there's definitely a sort of class element there. I mean, in the end, the film does try to say, actually, these rich people aren't that bad if you just give them a chance. Um,
Mm.
but I think it in Paths of Glory is sort of like critical of, I guess, like the army more directly, but could be seen again as a class thing.
Yeah.
Um, and obviously in America, the class is much more about economic status than other things.
Well, I mean, but the Philadelphia story would say it's not right, because what they're critiquing about those people is it's not really economic. It's about tastes and cultural
Mm,
habitus and things like that. I mean, there's different definitions of
well,
class. If you're talking
mm,
about class within capitalism, like a Marxist perspective would suggest that class is basically defined by your relationship to the means of production.
mhm,
Whereas something like, I think the way that we're looking at class in these films, and why I think that they're not really critiquing capitalism,
mm,
is they're talking about class really as a kind of social orientation, to
mhm,
do with accumulated capital, to do with tastes and values and
mm,
signifiers of class, as opposed to kind of material conditions in which class is
mm.
enacted or constructed.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I mean, I also think in the Philadelphia story, I mean, I think they're critiquing those things like the house and the taste only
Mm.
because they are rich people. Like, I don't know if they
Hmm.
actually are making, aesthetic values about. I think it's just they're finding things to pick on because they see themselves, uh, just like, in,
Yeah,
they see themselves as being in a different class from these people.
yeah. But then being
Yeah.
rich doesn't necessarily mean being a capitalist.
No, of course not. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I guess the class thing is slightly different, but yeah. Okay, should we move on to my number one pick?
Sure.
Okay.
Number one.
So my top pick of the 10 films that you've forced me, against my will, to watch,
Inflicted upon you.
yes, is Female Prisoner number 701, Scorpion.
Mm. Yeah, I was expecting this because we already kind of
Okay.
discussed this midway through the series, through the
Mm.
the first 10 episodes.
Hmm.
But yeah, okay. What did you like about this film?
I think, I mean, first of all, well, I don't know if that's a reason, but it's maybe the most different from any other kind of film I've watched.
Mm.
I suppose I have seen films like this before. I don't, but maybe I've never like sat through one from the beginning. I've come across these types of films, like I guess I don't know what's the genre exactly. Female prison exploitation films,
Women in
um,
prison.
women in prison. I have come across them, on TV or whatever, and watched a little bit. But I've never like sat down and watched one from beginning to end.
Mm.
Um, and I appreciate a lot about it. I appreciated the style, how it was shot, the performance, especially the central performance, which was
Mm.
fantastic. Um, the very sort of stylistic, expressionistic, touches and scenes that would suddenly switch into, how it was fine with just, shifting to very, abstract sets and ideas. Um, but it all felt very cohesive. It all worked together. Um, and yeah, I mean, we talked quite a bit, I think, at the time about this idea of, whether it could be a feminist film,
Mm.
considering it is, also designed to show a bunch of naked women, for, a certain type of audience who just probably just want to see that.
Mm.
Um, but I think like we talked about at the time, it did definitely made it clear that the male guards who are ogling the women are the bad guys.
Mm.
And so, yeah, I don't think we could ever quite square, whether or not, it's possible to be, to justify, showing all those naked women. But I think if it, I mean, and like we also discussed at the time, neither of us found the film particularly sexy or, you know, arousing
No.
in any way, except for that one scene. And so I think, so I don't know, for me, it definitely does work as a, you know, strong comment on the male gaze, while also being a very, very fun, visually, you know, adventurous and exciting film. Yeah.
Mm. Was this your first kind of taste of Japanese exploitation cinema?
I'm pretty sure it was. Yeah, and maybe I'd seen stuff before, but yeah, maybe like bits of things. But again, I don't think I'd ever sat down and watched anything from beginning to end before. Yeah.
You've seen in this series, you've seen a bit of European exploitation, like Strike Commando and The Beyond, I guess, to some extent. And I guess you might be familiar with some of the US exploitation stuff. Like you said, you'd seen women in prison films. What to you stuck out as being distinctive about the Japanese approach to or, you know, this is only one film, obviously, but about this film's approach to exploitation compared to, you know, those other countries?
Mm. I mean, the fact that it definitely was, it felt like a critique of the type of films that would just exist to, you know, show a lot of topless women. And I mean, to be honest, it was very, you know, and we'll maybe talk about some of those other films later, but just in general, it was, for me, it was just a very well made film. You know, I think we talked about the scene, the sort of, it was almost like done as like a play early on, like the sort of origin story scene. So, you know, very, very artistic and a lot of thought put into it. But even just scene to scene, you know, well shot and well edited, and yeah, well acted. I don't know, and so, you know, compared to some of those other films where you kind of get the feeling like I don't know, they've obviously put effort into it, but it's just, you know, just in terms of like pretty basic filmmaking, just not the best.
Okay. Yeah. I think this is a really interesting film. Like I said before, the second one in the series, which I think we might get to it in the second round of episodes, the next 20 episodes. I'm not sure. I'm quite keen to see what you think of it. I think the second one is an improvement. I think it takes all the good things about the first film and improves upon them. It takes away all the sort of, or most of the kind of sketchy things about the first film. And it's a much clearer statement, I think. So yeah, I'm looking forward to exposing you to that. My number one is Late Spring, 1949.
Okay. Also kind of what I was expecting.
Yeah. I thought that this was, I mean, it's a very gentle film. I have seen films like this before, but I think what I really liked about this film is it just reminded me that I like this kind of film. Because it's not the kind of film that I would sit down and watch. You know, I have in my head the kind of film that I will enjoy. And it isn't this kind of film. But I do like this kind of film. So I really enjoyed the sort of the gentle pace of it. The fact that it was a very small, confined story. It was a very human story. I thought the relationships between the characters were really nicely portrayed. And another thing that I thought was really impressive was we talked about it in the episode, but Noriko, is that the main character's name? Her smile. It's a very subtle part of the performance. She smiles. She has the same smile all the way throughout, but it starts out as a genuine smile full of happiness and warmth, and it ends as a kind of grimace masking, you know, the kind of deeper pain. And I just thought that was really well portrayed, and it showed a depth of emotion in the performance and being felt by the character that you couldn't portray with more overt kind of acting, with more, you know, explanation, with more emoting from the actor. I just thought it was brilliant. So yeah, I really like Late Spring.
Yeah, I mean her smile is very interesting. I think, you know, so she's in, you know, I think we talked about this time, but the actor Hara Setsuko, she was in several of Ozu's films around that time, and actually there's 3 films that they call the Noriko trilogy, where in each film she plays a character called Noriko, different characters, but they're always called Noriko, and they're very similar.
Yeah.
And they even share some sort of biographical details.
Mm.
And I think in all those films she has that smile, and I think maybe this time watching it, there's maybe also an element, like, I mean, you said like at the beginning she just has this kind of, she has that smile, and it's very open and friendly and everything, and by the end it turns into that grimace. But I mean, do you think there's an element of, even from the beginning, there's something else in that smile behind just a sort of unabashed joyfulness or cheerfulness?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that she's definitely she's always holding something back. I think that character. There's always, an idea that she wants to be doing something. Like, she talks about becoming a typist, right? Like, she's asking questions to a friend about becoming a typist. I think that there is some kind of ambition, or there's some kind of there's something that she wants to express, or something that she wants to achieve, something she wants to do. And I think that the smile is kind of, it's put on the front, perhaps, all the way through, but it becomes much more obvious towards the end. And we as the audience, of course, it's the thrust of the film, but we as the audience become much more aware of what she's trying to hide, and how the pain and, the turmoil inside her is being manifested in the very subtle changes in that smile.
Yeah. I think, did you say that you've seen Tokyo Story?
No, I've not seen Tokyo Story.
Okay. So, I mean, that's the most famous of the Noriko trilogy. And as far as I recall, in that film, she plays the daughter-in-law of the sort of central character, this older couple who come to Tokyo to visit their children. And their children are too busy to do anything with them. But they go to see their daughter-in-law. And I think, as far as I recall, she was married to the son who died. And so their son is no longer there. And she lives in a very, very modest, tiny little apartment, but she treats them she treats her parents-in-law much better than their own children treat them.
Right.
And she has that smile throughout her scenes in that film. But I think there's definitely a sense, like, she is, undoubtedly a very, very kind person, and she's very happy to look after these people. But you also get, there's an element in that smile, a slight knowingness to the smile, which is, I know your kids are they're jerks, basically.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a very interesting character. Okay, well, maybe we can put maybe Tokyo Story. I mean, pairing the next female prisoner film with Tokyo Story. It's obviously interesting that we only watched 2 Japanese films as part of this, and we've both chosen Japanese films as our favorite. I don't think it's anything to do with the fact that we live in Japan. No, I think they are genuinely the best films. But
yeah. Well, I have to say that there wasn't a lot of difference between my sort of top 3. I think that the order of the top 3 is just purely how much I enjoyed them at the end of it. My personal sort of response to them, not in terms of the quality of the films at all.
So we've done our top 3. Does that mean we're going to move into our bottom 3?
Yeah. I guess we don't need to spend quite so much time going into the bottom 3.
Maybe not.
But so do you want to do your number 3 worst film?
So third worst. Okay, it's not the worst. So I'm afraid I went for Deep Red.
Okay, I'm not surprised.
Okay,
I'm disappointed.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned at the time. Partly David Hemmings. He'll take maybe 40% of the blame for that. But again, I mean, like we talked about at the time, but just the style of it for me, just it felt too much, and too much just in terms of it didn't match what I felt was happening in the story.
Yeah.
Great music, but as a film, it didn't sell me on Argento.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think Argento's an acquired taste. Like I said, I'm not always the biggest fan of Argento. I think he can often come across as quite cold and, more interested in the the display that he's putting on than the story. But that was why I chose this film, because I thought it got away from that a little bit. I think what I'll do for one of the next 10 episodes is choose a giallo from a different director, another very good giallo, and see if that changes your mind at all on the genre. So it's not just the style of Argento that's distracting you, but of course, a lot of these films were influenced by Argento. So, you know, my number 3 least liked. I mean, it's difficult because I did like pretty much all of the films that you showed to me, but I think that if I was gonna choose a third one, it would probably be Chungking Express.
Okay.
Not because I didn't like it, but it's not really the kind of film that resonates with me. It's a little bit, well, actually, it's kind of similar to your issue with Deep Red. It's a little bit gimmicky, I felt. And a little bit quirky. I'm not a fan of quirk, you know.
A little twee, perhaps?
Yes. Yeah. A little bit twee, a little bit quirky, a little bit, eh.
I have to say, like, I think I mentioned this this was the first time I'd seen it in a while. And it was a film I remember liking a lot in my early 20s, and it didn't quite hold up for me this time of watching it. So I can understand that.
Yeah, but again, not a bad film. Interesting structure. 2 stories. You know, a diptych. What do you call me? It just wasn't really for me, but not a bad film.
My number 2 is The Beyond.
Okay, I thought you were going to say that, but I am upset.
And actually, I enjoyed it. So I wonder deeper in The Beyond. But yeah, I'll say The Beyond. I enjoyed it, and I was happy that I watched it. There were some very nice moments. The ending was great, and the sort of general build throughout the whole film I liked. I guess it was mainly the what I perceived as a bit of incompetence in terms of the actual filmmaking. The dubbing and the editing and all these things. I guess we'll talk about it later perhaps, but part of what that meant to me also is just kind of pulling me out of the story and making it hard for me to take it too seriously. And, I guess you don't have to take this kind of film too seriously. Maybe it's not meant to be taken too seriously, but it is about, serious things in theory, at least. And so, so just, like being aware of it in those ways. Yeah. Again, not one I would go back to.
Yeah, I think there's definitely another Fulci film that I want to get to, which might be a bit more. I mean, all of these films have some level of editing issues or sound issues or whatever, because they were made on fairly low budgets, with not always the most experienced crews, with whichever actors they could get a lot of the time. But I think that. To appreciate these films, I think you have to accept all of those kinds of imperfections. I want to get to some Spanish horror from the 70s later. It might even be the next episode. And those films also have a lot of imperfections. And if you approach them just as cinema, then you probably will be a little bit disappointed. But as I said before, I think we talked about this in the first episode. I don't think it actually went into the episode, but for me, and I think for a lot of fans of this kind of, stuff, these are fascinating as art, but just as importantly as artifacts. These are things that were being produced in a particular milieu. I find, the characters, the people making them, the sort of socio-political context in which they were made to be just really interesting. And how they were kind of trying to do something different, how they were trying to make a name for themselves, and talking about capitalism, how they were trying to exploit trends to make money. I find all of that really, really interesting, and I think that kind of thinking about them in that context adds to just watching them as a film, as it in itself as it stands. So yeah, I don't know. I think maybe that's something that it's going to be difficult to convey, but that's kind of how I see that film and films like it.
All right. What about your number 2?
My number 2, so I've been going back and forth a little bit. I'm going to say Before Sunset. And I was going to say Hannah and Her Sisters, but you know what? I was mean about that film when we talked about it. But in retrospect, I think I liked it more. So I've shoved it up. I think that's my number 4 least favorite.
Okay. Interesting. Oh, right. Least favorite. Yeah.
Guys, in a list of 10, Yeah, I think Before Sunset, I enjoyed it. But again, it was just
Mhm.
it was a little bit gimmicky. It was a little bit twee at times. For me,
Mm.
it was, you talked about like self-conscious filmmaking. I think this is
Mm.
very self-conscious filmmaking. In that it
Self-conscious in what way? Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
yeah,
Go ahead.
in the sense that it's trying to do something that hasn't really been done before. Like trying to
Mhm.
have the whole film structured around a very long, drawn out conversation where the themes of the film are sort of raised again and again between the characters. Um,
Mm.
and obviously, often the script, as I think I mentioned in our discussion of it, the script would sometimes ending up feeling a little bit contrived. Like it was trying to be very naturalistic, but it ended up feeling a little bit contrived to me because obviously people don't talk
Mm.
like that a lot of the time. So I
Mm.
didn't dislike it. I enjoyed watching it while I was watching it. But again, it's just not what I would go back to because it's just, at the end of the day, it's just not my taste in films.
Mm.
But
Yeah.
I did enjoy watching it. I was glad to have watched it. As you
Mm.
often say, but it wasn't my favorite.
I wonder if I don't think it would have made too much difference. I wonder if as we talked, it's the second, it's the sequel
Yeah.
basically, and it's the middle of a trilogy. Um, although never really intended as a trilogy, certainly not from the beginning. And so, yeah, I wonder if we had started with Before Sunrise, which is when we first meet these characters 9 years earlier. And but it's the same thing. It's basically the two characters walking on. I guess the difference is it's not in real time. So it takes place over, I don't know, 9 hours or something rather than the 90 minutes of the actual film. But other than that, it's very, very similar. But it's also about the characters falling in love because they've just met each other. Yeah, I don't think it would make too much difference, to be honest. I mean, they're very, very similar
Right.
films. And so if you don't like that style. The Before Midnight, which is the third one, which is 9 years after Before Sunset, for me, I mean, in a lot of ways, that's the most interesting because Before Sunset is them meeting and falling in love, and then at the end, going off and not sure if they'll ever see each other again. And Before Sunset is them kind of finally meeting each other again, and then kind of falling in love again, basically. Before Midnight is very different. It's they've known each other for a long time by this point. And it's basically a very detailed examination of, I guess, like a sort of mid-stage marriage and all the difficulties that go along with that.
Okay.
And yeah, but anyway, I don't know if you're at all interested, I would suggest that one. It's closer. It's the closest you would get to a horror film in a way that you could in terms of two characters just talking in a hotel room.
Okay. Well, yeah, sounds interesting. I might enjoy it if it's less twee. I might enjoy it more.
Yeah, it's probably still a bit twee, to be honest. But yeah.
All right, and your number one. I know what it is, but go on, say it anyway.
You know what it is. It's obviously Strike Commando.
It's the best film ever.
Yeah, it's yeah. I mean, I'm sure I've seen films like that. Who knows? I may have even seen it as a kid in the 80s. I don't know. Yeah, for me, it was just bad, and I mean, there's obviously the so bad it's a good thing, and there's the film, and I've definitely enjoyed watching terrible movies with friends and making fun of them, and probably if I'd watch this with a bunch of people, and we could just make fun of the film, that might be a fun experience. But just as a film on its own, I just thought it was bad. I don't know.
It is bad. I'm not. I didn't choose it because it was good.
Yeah.
It's
yes. Yeah. Right. But I think so. For me, that's what kind of distinguishes it a little bit. I mean, The Beyond for me is sort of more in that category than most of the other films, or maybe any of the other films. In fact, the other films I think are good films or good movies, like well-made movies. And this one just felt like, I don't know, it was hard to see anybody involved with it, like what talent they were bringing into it.
Well, that's why I like it. I like it that it's so incompetent.
Okay.
It's such an obvious cash grab that it's so poorly plotted and acted, and none of it makes any sense. And so that's why I like it. This is why it's good. I mean, I'm kind of
Okay.
fascinated by Bruno. I've seen
Yeah.
more films by Bruno Mattei than almost any other filmmaker, and I don't like any of his films really. Like, there's not a single one that's
Uh-huh.
good, but I just find him kind of
Yeah.
fascinating. Like, like
Mm.
how did this happen? Who gave him money? What and
Mm.
why? You know, um,
Uh-huh.
yeah. So that's. I mean, again, I think part of appreciating, this kind of trash cinema,
Mm.
is you just have to sort of settle into the tempo of it, and appreciate
Mm.
that it's bad, it's really bad, but that's kind of the charm, and it's very silly, and the fact that what they're trying to do is make a good film. Like, they're not doing it on purpose. They're trying to make at least a passable film. They know that they're B-movie people. I think later in life, I think Bruno Mattei kind of accepted, okay, I'm the band that makes shit. But I think
Uh-huh.
at this time
Uh-huh.
he was trying to make something good. He just couldn't. And I think there's a certain charm about that.
Yeah. I guess, I mean, yeah, like, so, like in an Ed Wood kind of
Yeah,
way.
exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I can understand that. I just don't want to watch it
Okay,
myself.
fair enough.
Yeah. But so one thing I'm curious about is, so how, obviously there's a lot of bad movies out there, like very, like incompetently made movies. Like, what makes one terrible movie more watchable or more enjoyable to you than
Whether
another?
it's fun. I
Okay.
mean, I've seen some
Right.
terrible movies that are, I mean, you've said before, like, the worst thing a film can be, right, is boring. I've seen a lot of
Mm.
terrible movies that are boring. Like, it's just that it's not interesting. There's nothing
Mm.
fun happening.
Mm.
Like, the film that I mentioned at the start of the episode, Cruel Jaws,
Mm.
that is a bad film. That's very bad. There's no saving grace in that.
Mhm.
But it's, well,
Mm.
first, it's such an audacious ripoff. I
Mm.
respect it to some degree. The
Mhm.
dialogue is hilarious. I love the fact that the entire film is like groups of actors. Like, whenever it's a dialogue scene, they don't even really bother with reverse shot a lot of the time. It's just all the actors together, and they're filmed in sort of a medium
Uh-huh.
shot. And then occasionally they sort of
Okay.
zoom in almost randomly on people. and
Okay.
I,
So, like, almost Robert
sure,
Altman-esque,
yeah.
I would
Well,
say. Yeah.
again, devotee of Mattei Altman.
Well, yeah. And some people have accused Altman of being a bad
Yeah,
filmmaker. Some of his shots do feel sort of amateurish and
yeah.
bad.
I
Yeah.
think for me, it's
Okay.
just like, does it keep me entertained? Does it make me laugh? Like, I mean,
Mm.
Strike Commando makes me laugh at
Mhm.
several points. Like, all of the
Mhm.
Vietnamese villagers chanting American Red Brown, and then him
Mhm.
talking to the little kid about popcorn. Going, oh, you just
Mhm.
climb up the trees and pick the popcorn right on
Disneyland. Yeah. Uh-huh.
and all that kind of stuff. I think it's ridiculous. I love, like we
Mm.
mentioned, the grenades that smoke for no reason. The dialogue that doesn't make any sense. The little
Uh-huh.
outro where he just sort of word salads his way over the credits.
Mhm.
Um,
Uh-huh.
I love it. I love how, how silly it all is. It just doesn't make any sense, and I'm
Mm.
not bored. So
Mhm.
that's what I get out
Mm.
of these films.
Yep.
Something like The
Fair
Beyond, I
enough.
think, is a genuinely good film. It's not a perfectly made film, but
Mhm.
I mean, there's something about the aesthetic of those Italian films that really appeals to me. There's something about the kind of film grain, the gore, the fact that
Mm.
you mentioned the editing, the fact that the shots don't quite line up sometimes. I kind of like that. That's sort of the
Mm.
aesthetic of the thing. It's almost like, in French New Wave, you get a lot of jump cuts, right, where they just cut out sections of the dialogue and it just cuts between shots of, someone in the same position, and it feels a bit jarring.
Mm.
But it doesn't matter, right? Because it's sort of a, it's a stylistic thing. I think there is a sort of
Mm.
stylistic thing to how for some reason, Italian films particularly have that issue where there's sort of lots of cuts that don't quite work because they just didn't have the budget to fix it. But again, it's part of the charm. It's part of the
Mm.
aesthetic, and I really like it.
All right. Fair enough. And your number one movie? I think I know what it is.
Of course, it is
Uh-huh.
Squid and the Whale. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought so.
And again, by the end of it, I was fine with it.
Mhm.
But
Mm.
I had to put it in last place because I had such a horrible time up until the end of it. I wasn't enjoying it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I just
Yeah.
like, So I wouldn't say this is twee, but it is that kind of there's that kind of aesthetic sensibility of indie filmmaking. It's a bit a bit
Mhm.
shoegazy, a bit navel gazy. It's explorations of characters that I don't like and I don't want to spend time with. Like I can spend time with flawed characters, but here I felt I was being forced to
Mhm.
spend time with largely repulsive characters. And
Mm.
yeah, there was up until the end when it kind of made sense, when it cohered. Um,
Mm.
I really didn't like it. I think maybe it's the kind of film that I like the concept more than the
Mm.
execution.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay. You describe the characters as repulsive. Like, would you describe the two boys as
Not
repulsive?
exactly. Well, not repulsive in the way that the dad's repulsive, because the
Mm.
dad is
Yeah. I mean, he's a
a piece of
yeah,
work.
unabashed
Yeah,
sort of villain.
yeah.
Yeah.
The two boys. I mean, they're obviously sympathetic characters, but
Mm.
like in the moment of spending time with them, I understood why they were doing the
Mm.
things that they did. I understood that they weren't bad kids. You know, that they were reacting to the
Mm.
situations around them. But I
Mhm.
was I felt repulsed by them still. Maybe that says something about me. But yeah, I knew that they
Uh-huh.
were sympathetic characters. And again, like I like the concept of what the film was doing, but I didn't
Mm.
particularly enjoy the way that it was done. Um, I think
Mm.
it's also possibly because, like, especially Jesse Eisenberg, um, I
Mhm.
don't find him a particularly charismatic performer. So I think
Mm.
the same character being played by a different actor would have been more successful with me, perhaps.
Mm.
I mean, maybe he's my David Hemmings, and this is something I'll bring up later. I think I did appreciate the film in retrospect, seeing the final shot, and
Mhm.
the way that it changed the camera work, and I think even Eisenberg's performance there in the final moment, that made me appreciate the rest of the film more. It kind of recontextualized the rest of the film for me. So yeah, I
Yeah.
appreciated it for that final moment, if nothing else.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a challenge with any film that is so heavily
Mm,
autobiographical, and which it is by all accounts of the director. Yeah, I guess. I mean, if and especially like if you have little to relate to. I mean, I think that maybe there are things that most people can relate to. There's elements of
mm,
it, um, but it being sort of so specific to his experience and the time and the place that it takes place in. Yeah, maybe if you don't have that connection, that's an extra sort of layer of
mm.
removal.
So, the premise of this show is that we force each other to watch films that the other one would not normally choose to watch. Um, and the idea is to kind of see these films through each other's eyes. And there's kind of two meanings to that, as we've kind of discussed in the past.
Well, I think it's both how you would react to the film that I've chosen for you, but also like how you watch the films that you've
Yes,
chosen.
that's right. Yeah, with
So
your
yeah.
kind of perspective in mind. So, well, with that in mind, why don't we discuss a little bit about what we've learned from watching these films? Did you have any
Mhm.
thoughts about this?
I mean, I think one thing I learned from watching the films that you've chosen is the I think like I've tried to sort of understand the appeal of films, especially
Mm,
horror films or like films that um, put characters through very sort of extreme situations, and very much the kind of situations that you don't want to find yourself in. Um, and I think like one of the sort of impetuses of this podcast was me telling you that I don't like horror
mm,
films, and the main reason why I don't like it is just I don't want to sort of have to empathize or to go sympathize with not sympathize. I don't want to empathize with characters who are experiencing such horrific
mm,
things. I mean, and especially in terms of really nasty things happening to them physically, but also psychologically, and just uh, being scared and being chased and all those kind of
mm,
things. Um, for me, that's the thing that I've really struggled with to understand all my life about horror films, is like why people would want to watch that. My mother really likes horror
oh,
films,
nice.
Um, and I mean, it even took me to some, like when I was a kid, probably at too young an age. Maybe this is, maybe I'm just uncovering
The root of the
the real
trauma.
reason why, the root of the trauma. Yeah, I remember she took me to see, I don't remember what year the first Child's Play came out. But she took me to see Child's Play. I think I told her, like, I don't like these kind of films. I don't like horror films. But she insisted. She said, "Oh no, I've heard this is a really good one." And she took me to see it. I didn't like it. I didn't
Good
like
film.
it at all. Yeah. So I guess, I mean, I still don't, to be honest, I still don't understand that. But actually we haven't really seen those types of films. But what I can appreciate is cinema is like a lot of, media. It can be used in a lot of different ways. Yeah, so I think, I mean, this idea, for example, in The Beyond, characters being put in such extreme situations, or in Deep Red, being faced with serial killers and that kind of stuff, and seeing those kills, I don't know, maybe I'm still struggling a little bit to understand the appeal of those kinds of things.
Why do you think, based on our discussions, why do you think I like them?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I think based on our discussions, I think there's different reasons or different approaches you have for these films. I mean, like you just talked about, the films where, there's Strike Commando, which is maybe an example of just liking, enjoying the fun of watching a really bad film. That's still, intentionally or unintentionally has humorous moments in it just because of how bad it is. But you've also talked about films that are, films that you think are well made and well structured. And I think it seems to be partly an aesthetic thing. Like you talked a little bit, just like liking the aesthetic of some of those films. I mean, what's interesting is looking at our films chronologically. I didn't choose any film between 1963 and 1986. Whereas I didn't choose any films from the 70s. I chose only one film from the 80s. Whereas you chose quite a few. I think more than half of your films are from the 70s and 80s. And I feel kind of ashamed, to be honest, because the 80s is sort of my sweet spot of that's kind of what I was reared on, was 80s movies. But maybe I associate the aesthetic of those kind of films as being a sort of poor quality, potentially. Yeah, I'm not sure. And so I think maybe there's an aesthetic thing. Yeah, I'm not sure. That you can tell me why you like these.
Yeah, well, as I've said before, I think that there are several different points. There's one is an aesthetic thing. I think there's a predilection for sort of dark topics. I think there some people are just drawn to that. I think I am. I think that there is an element of catharsis. Seeing something very horrific happening and then coming out the other end. There's a sort of ritualistic element to that, and I appreciate that. And I think that there's sort of a sort of tricksterish thing, a sort of world turned upside down thing. When you're watching, it's sort of a subcultural thing within horror, but you're kind of celebrating all of the things that are, seen as revolting by society. And it reminds me a little bit of, the Fool's Day or whatever in the Hunchback of Notre Dame, that the world turned upside down and we're suddenly celebrating the things, the underclasses and the criminals and the murderers and the things which are repressed by society. So I think there's probably something, I don't know, something sort of Freudian or psychoanalytic there about the repressed elements of the id. Is the id or the ego? I can't remember which one. Maybe being allowed to surface briefly while you're watching these films. Yeah. So I think there's several different reasons, and I think the thing is, horror is not just one thing, right? You've got lots of different types of horror, and different types of horror have different kind of social messages. So like slashers are often seen as very socially conservative, whereas I don't know, something like we talked about women in prison films can be painted or framed in a feminist kind of way. Revenge films tend to be almost fascistic in the way that they, message about the topic. And, zombie films can be critiques of capitalism or critiques of, herd behavior on the part of people. That they can be kind of anything, And so I think that appreciating the horror is, in a way, horror is part of the cinema of the fantastic, It can be anything. It can critique anything. It can focus on different things. I think here we've seen films which are focused on, horror of the body. We've seen films which are focused on kind of more psychological horror. We've seen films which are, kind of people being stalked. We've seen films which are basically kind of romantic stories dressed up in the trappings of horror. We've seen films about forgiveness. I think the fact that horror is a fantastical genre allows people to, use it to put across as many messages as they want. So I think it's a very, very broad genre, and I think that it has an appeal because of the aesthetic qualities, and there are certain groups of people for whom that appeals to. So that's a bunch of a big stew of different reasons that I like horror and why it appeals to me. But I think the main one is that I'm just a creepy little freak.
Yeah. So, I mean, it sounded like you're talking a little bit about the transgressive sort of nature of it. Is it maybe like a sort of relatively like kind of safe way to indulge in those transgressions?
I don't think I don't think there's many people who watch a horror film and think, God, I wish I could do that. So I don't think.
No, I don't mean that. I don't mean like wanting to do it, but I mean like just not. Yeah. I mean just facing up to them or. Because I mean, these films are, for the most part, meant to be enjoyable to watch, and so you're watching these sort of horrific things, but as entertainment.
Well, I mean that is the idea kind of catharsis, right? I think there's the difference between transgression and catharsis. I think with catharsis, it's a way of processing and coming face to face with fears, but whereas with transgressiveness, it's more about just momentarily breaking out of whatever strictures you're placed in socially, or topics that are considered outside the realm of proper society. And I think that there is some benefit to doing that. It's a little bit mind expanding in a way, to kind of just for a moment to sort of consider and celebrate those things, and to just enjoy them and revel in them. I think it's sometimes healthy to do that in a safe environment. So yeah, I think there's some truth in what you say.
The other thing I noticed is, I mean, you talked about like some of the themes it addresses, maybe not for all these films, but for quite a few of them. And I mean, it could be sort of more kind of social or themes at the sort of societal level, perhaps. And just things that the film's going to address. I think there's like elements of those certainly in quite a few of the films that I chose, but I think maybe one potential difference is the films I chose maybe tend to focus more on sort of the psychology of individual characters.
Yeah.
And so maybe there's a bit more of a focus on sort of individual psychology rather than at the social level.
I think possibly. I mean, that is something that I noticed about your films, is that they do tend to be, like you say, focused on individual characters or individual relationships between small numbers of people. Maybe sometimes using that to comment on wider issues, but primarily they're stories about individuals. And maybe that's a difference in orientation between the two of us. Like I'm quite sociologically oriented, and I think you're. I don't know if it's fair to say that you're not so much interested in that, but I think, just from speaking to you and knowing you, I think that you're quite interested in people as individual people, and I'm interested in sort of more group society-based stuff. So that might just be a difference in philosophy or a difference in perspective.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
But so you chose basically a lot of dramas, and I've always thought that drama for me is like the least interesting genre because it's just people bloody talking, isn't it? But what is it that draws you to dramas as opposed to to genres? What is it that you value about this?
Yeah, I mean, maybe ironically, I think that for me there is also a cathartic element to it. I think we talked about this when we were talking about Hannah and her sisters, but this thing of seeing, like, I guess part of it is also I what I like, and we talked about the films I chose maybe focusing on these individual characters and their relationships. But I think reflecting on the choices I made, a lot of these films are about, for me, like having relatable characters, not fully relatable, but relatable in terms of, characters making the types of mistakes that I worry about making, like in my everyday life. or making the right choices that I wish I had made, or acting in certain ways that I wish I had or could. And so for me, I think I like seeing myself reflected a little bit in the characters in the film. And it could be, there's, part of it is Humphrey Bogart in A Big Sleep. There's very little I can relate to, except maybe I just think he's really cool, and I wish I was that cool. It might be that simple. And I wish I could engage in, snappy dialogue with Lauren Bacall like that, and maybe something similar with the Philadelphia Story. So I think that's an element of it. Late Spring, I guess maybe I don't find the character so relatable, but I think in that case, I just find the depth of sort of the way that the film and the story goes so deep into analyzing, or not analyzing, but engaging with this character and with the characters. I just find interesting, and maybe it's back to that sort of individual psychology thing.
Yeah, I noticed.
So I think that's
in our discussions, like with Lake Mungo, for example, your focus was really on the characters and the relationships between the characters, and that was actually really interesting for me, because it gave me a completely different perspective on the film that I hadn't really thought about before. So I think that was quite a fruitful discussion, really. It's interesting that you say you like to see yourself reflected in the characters, because I don't like that. I actually said about The Squid and the Whale, one thing that I didn't like about it was that I could see myself as a young man doing some of the things that Jesse Eisenberg's character did, Walt. And I don't like that. Like, a lot of the films that I chose don't have very, very deep or developed characters. It's much more about escapism in a way. When I watch these films, I don't want to see the real world depicted, because I don't find the real world terribly interesting. I like being in my imagination. I like,
Yeah, so do I. I think that's one reason I like film so much. But I think when you say you don't find the real world, I think you find, again, maybe just going back to this thing, I think you find the real world at a societal level interesting to think about, at least. It's interesting, like the number 4 film, and it could have been higher, was Della Morte.
Del Morte.
Yeah. Sorry, I got wrong way around. Yeah, Della Morte. And I think, again, like when we talked about that film, one thing I liked about it was the examination of him as a character. I thought it was very interesting. Yeah, I think we found some maybe interesting points that sort of explain a little bit about why we have such different tastes in films.
One thing that I was going to note, I've mentioned this before, I think, but there's a filmmaker called Jorge Grau, who made The Living Dead at the Manchester Morgue and Hunting Ground and Castle of Blood. That's the only 3 films I've seen of his, but I really like him as a filmmaker. We're definitely going to watch The Living Dead at the Manchester Morgue. But I saw an interview with him once, and he was asked, like, why do you work in horror? And he said, because horror fans are the most positive audience. They'll sit through a load of old garbage, because they're always looking for the one great moment, and then I heard, I think maybe Andy Nyman on another podcast, talking about ghost stories, and he said, like, people watching regular films will say, oh yeah, it was a great film, but there was this one moment that ruined it. He said, but horror fans, they'll say, oh, that film's rubbish, the acting's terrible, the plot doesn't make any sense, the editing's all over the place, but there's this one moment, and you've got to see it for this one moment, right? And I kind of thought, I've noticed this a little bit, I don't know if you think this is fair, a little bit in our reactions to films. Like, for example, The Squid and the Whale, I kind of really disliked all of it, but I said, at the end, there was that one moment, and that one moment for me made watching the entire film worth it. Whereas, for example, talking about Deep Red, you're like, I don't like David Hemmings, you ruined the film for me. And I think there's a few other examples. I wonder if you thought that was a fair observation.
I think it might be, because as I said, even in Deep Red and The Beyond, I like the end of The Beyond a lot. I like the ending, but maybe unlike you in Squid and the Whale, it didn't quite justify the rest of the film for me. So I think, maybe that is a fair comment. I guess the other thing to say is, I think most of the films I chose are, well-made films as well.
Yeah.
And I guess, some more than others, but that's also something that I sort of aware that I value in films that I watch, is the sort of the craft of it as well. I remember watching Paths of Glory as a teenager, I think, first time I saw it. And there's a scene in the three guys in the prison. And I think like the guy, he throws a knife at somebody else, or he throws something at it. And there's just an edit from one angle to the next. And I remember like watching that cut over and over again, just rewinding and watching it like 10 times in a row, because I just couldn't get over how brilliant that one bit of editing was. And so that technical side of it has sort of always appealed to me as well.
And I'm perhaps less interested in that. I'm interested, like I said, more in the artifact nature of the film than the art of the film. But well, this gives us something to work with going forwards. I think I've been a little bit safe in my choices a lot of the time. I think I'm gonna go a bit more off the rails with some of the choices in the future to see what you say about them. But I think it's important that we always approach these films, like you said, trying to understand what the other person appreciates about them and try to look at them in that way.
And I think there is an end point to this podcast, which is, I mean, it may take us who knows how many episodes, but we find the film that kind of does it for both of us. That like all these things we've been talking about in this episode, it somehow manages to combine all those things together.
Okay, we'll keep an eye out for that. And that when we've hit that, we have to stop.
That's the end of our 10-episode roundup. Have you been inspired to watch any of the movies we've discussed so far? Have we managed to change your mind about any that you'd been avoiding? We'd love to hear your feedback.
If you have any comments or suggestions for future films, please send them to awkwarddoublebills@gmail.com. You can also follow the show over on Blue Sky at addbbpod.bluesky.social, and we'll be back with a regular episode very soon.